Well, coming up next, a conversation about ReelAbilities. But first, filmmaker Jason DeSilva's 2013 New York Times op-doc about his difficulty navigating the city's public transportation as a disabled person.
Hi, my name is Jason DeSilva. I'm an independent filmmaker. I live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. In 2005, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. At the time, New York City was my playground. Fast forward to today. Walking has become tough for me, and I use a scooter to get around. And it's not so easy. There are a lot of places I can't get in. My subway entrance has no elevator. So looping around a 7-block radius becomes old after a while. Even though it's one stop to get to the city, I can't get there. Or maybe I just haven't been trying hard enough. Today, I decided to try an experiment. Wheelchair versus no wheelchair. How long does it take to get to Manhattan? My friend Steve is a good sport. So I asked him to time his trip, my neighborhood to my favorite coffee shop in Manhattan. It's 3 easy stops on the subway. Take the L to 1st Avenue to 3rd Avenue, then Union Square. Here are my options. 1 bus, 2 Access-a-Ride, 3 subway, and 4 ferry. Buses are accessible, but in recent years, the MTA canceled the only bus service going from my neighborhood to Manhattan, so there's no bus. I could take New York City's service for people with disabilities, Access-a-Ride, also known as Stress-a-Ride, for its tendency to be late and to miss pickups altogether. It has a 1-day in advance reservation policy, so if I wanted to take it, I would have had to have booked yesterday. Next option. Since I can't get into my subway stop, I can take the B62 bus to the James E stop at Mercy Avenue. I could take the JZ to Chambers Street, where I transfer to the 6. Oh wait, the map shows that the 6 train has an elevator, but the transfer doesn't. So that won't work. Next idea. Take the M de Lafayette, transfer to the 6. Take the 6 up to Union Square. Oh, but wait, there's no elevator up to the surface from the 6, so that won't work. Last idea, I'll take the M to West 4th, transfer to the ACE, then go to 14th Street, transfer to the L, cut back across. Oh wait, I can't tell, is the L accessible at Union Square? From the map, I have no idea. The subways have a long way to go before I can call them accessible. So that leaves me with my last and best option, the ferry. Steve and I set off at the same time. Steve takes the Bedford L subway, down the stairs, a simple wait. To Union Square. Back up the stairs and he's there. 13 minutes and 5 seconds. Meanwhile, I'm just getting on the ferry. It comes every hour. The closest ferry stop to Union Square is 34th Street. So I take the ferry up and transfer to the M34 bus. Steve's losing his patience. Then take another bus to Union Square. I arrive in 1 hour and 43 minutes. By the time I arrive, Steve's given up on my experiment. Lucky for me, the return isn't so bad. There's a brand new service to dispatch an accessible cab. So I take that back to Brooklyn. So anyways, this is my life. There are a lot of things that New York City does well, but helping their disabled population get around is not one of them. And while I'm waiting for things to change, you can find me here, at home in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Organizations across the country are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. This landmark legislation changed the lives of people with disabilities, though there's still a long way to go, as we just saw in that video. The next BRIC Flicks event here at BRIC House on Tuesday, July 14th is presented in partnership with ReelAbilities, New York Disabilities Film Festival.
New York City-based filmmaker, media, artist, and activist Jason Da Silva will deliver a featured artist talk that evening. He's been documenting his experience living with primary progressive multiple sclerosis for the last 10 years, and he joins us today. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
From ReelAbilities, we're also very happy to welcome festival director Isaac Zablocki.
Thank
Hello.
you.
Welcome.
And Faye Ginsberg, an advisor to the ReelAbilities Film Festival and co-director of the Council for the Study of Disability at NYU. And thank you all for being here today.
Thanks so much. Faye, let's start with you. We're celebrating this anniversary, so tell us about the Americans with Disabilities Act. Tell us about this piece of legislation, why it's so important.
Well, there was a lot of legislation for people with disabilities over the course of the 20th century. Much of it had to do with enabling children to go to school with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. But until that time, really, there was nothing legislating that people with disabilities should have access to public spaces along with all other citizens. So that was really a very big, important movement that built up over the last couple decades of the 20th century, a coalition of activists of all sorts, veterans, family, and of course family members, because even though people with disabilities is the largest minority in the U.S., counted at 54 million, every one of those people has their advocates, supporters, and loved ones. So really it's a huge number of people. It's actually kind of astonishing it took till 1990 to get that through. And while it's enabled many things to happen, so most, my students at NYU can't imagine a world without curb cuts, but that was not the case.
Right.
When I was a young person, nor on my block when I was growing up in Chicago were, families with kids with disabilities. None of those kids actually had the right to go to school at that time. So it's really an astonishing revolution, but we have, we always more to do. And Jason's work and the ReelAbilities Film Festival are doing the next important piece of that, which is really changing the cultural world and the images we see and the stories we hear. And it's not, just like this is good for you. People like Jason are unbelievably talented filmmakers who use their experiences to also be inventive and creative and formally experimental with the work they do, as well as activists. So I'm sure he'll talk today also about some of the apps he's been working on and other projects along with the
Well, it sounds like you have a lot going on, because we were talking a little earlier about the apps. You're talking, he edits, he does video, you do so many different things. Yeah. Now, in the video we just watched, we watched you trying to traverse from Brooklyn to Manhattan and all the difficulties that ensues. Since, When I Walk came out in 2013, have any changes been implemented in that specific route?
I'd love to say yes, but the answer is no.
Oh, darn.
It's still as difficult for me to get from Brooklyn to Manhattan, and actually even getting within Brooklyn, or Queens to Brooklyn, is difficult. So even getting here today for this whole interview has been difficult. So on the 14th, when we present, I'm going to have another challenge of just getting here to present.
Yeah. Okay, now your activism are largely focused on barriers to transportation. How did that, for you, transform into actual activism?
Oh yeah, so like transportation actually is just one of the things.
Right.
So like one of the bigger things, it's all about accessibility. So like not just transportation, but looking at, like curb cuts, things like steps going up to someplace. These are all things that just people don't think about. Like I wasn't disabled until 10 years ago, so I didn't think twice about it before. Right. So I know exactly what it's like to be able-bodied and not think about these things. But now I'm on the flip side, and I want everybody to know and think about it in their own lives, how to help people with disabilities.
Even in that video clip when you went to the train station, it had the icon, the disability icon, but you couldn't use it because it said for the transfer you couldn't use it. Like, how frustrating is that?
It's a day-to-day frustration. There's always something. It's at the point now where I'm not even surprised. There's always something each and every day. It's just like, as Faith said, it's an ongoing thing that needs to be changed. It's like an ongoing struggle, and it's just going to keep going. It's people out there, people like myself, other artists, activists, we're the ones that are going to keep changing the world, for people with disabilities.
Right, and ReelAbility is trying to do just that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that fest?
The festival's been around for now over 8 years, and it's a festival that is much needed. I was running the film program at the JCC in Manhattan, and we were getting so many films on the topic of disabilities that nobody was seeing, nobody was screening anywhere, and they were fabulous films. And I guess film festivals have their one slot sometimes for a film about disabilities. And other than that, these films are not getting out there. And we decided to start a film festival that took off immediately. We started having it in 15 locations. It's since then grown to 37 locations, and now also national. We've had it in 15 cities across the country. And clearly there's a need and a demand for these films. And we're not just showing films, although we choose them based on their artistic merit. We're not just showing them for art's sake. We also see ourselves as part of a revolution that's going on, and hoping that these will impact some change and create an environment that's more inclusive.
I like to say it's like a film movement, in a way. Like what they're doing is they're getting these stories out there that, other people just wouldn't hear about. So it's really exciting.
I also want to talk about how important it is to think about the infrastructure of theaters and why we mostly don't see people with disabilities as audiences that the film industry takes seriously. One of the exercises I give my students when I teach my culture and media class is to go to the ReelAbilities Festival and count how many power chairs are in the room, look at closed captioning or signing for people with limited hearing, or audio description for people who have limited vision or who are blind, adjusting rooms for audiences with autism when a film is addressing that particular issue, so changing the sensory environment. And, so I remember what opening night 2 years ago, I think there were I think we maxed out at 40 power chairs in the room, and then I asked them to go to just a regular commercial theater and count how many spaces there were for power chairs, which was 0. I said, you can all do this math, even if you're in humanities, this is 0. So, but that hugely changed their consciousness, just not only in seeing the work, which really impressed so many people, and so many students are coming in, they're post-ADA people. They grew up in a generation when disability is really in their world, but they don't necessarily know how to make sense of it. So first they're seeing the stories and the really fantastic work that's being produced of all sorts, from documentary to experimental kinds of projects, and very international. But they're also recognizing, space and accommodations in movie theaters and cultural locations should just be as normal as having curb cuts on the street or braille signage in elevators and stuff like that. So, it's just a really, it's a long battle, as Jason said, just even about transport.
How do we make these changes? I mean, who do we need to push and get at the table here?
I believe he said nothing has changed in the last 2 years on that route. Yet you've documented your experience. We have the ReelAbilities, film festival. What politicians do we need to drag into the ReelAbilities Film Fest to actually, see how their, fellow constituents are living? Like, what can we really do to? We've documented it, but what can we do to really get the word out and the change done?
I think more people need to see it. I think more people need to experience it. I think Hollywood needs to change. That's one of the things that ReelAbilities is working on. Hollywood doesn't include enough people with disabilities in their films, and when they do, they're in very specific kinds of roles. So we're really hoping that people will start seeing films instead of this week going to I don't know what the next blockbuster is, but I promise you there's a better film out there that shows that's possibly more inclusive and shows another part of our society that Hollywood chose not to invest in, even if it's a huge minority and a huge part of our
54
population.
million people. You know, if you put more access to it, you can fill up the entire theater. Everybody loves being in the movies on a hot summer day.
Numbers are good, yeah. And if you talk to demographers, they think 54 million is a low count because a lot of folks don't get in there for lots of different reasons. But my daughter, I got into the movement through my daughter, who was born with a very rare and unusual condition. And from the age of 9 or 10, she would be watching whatever she's watching on TV, and she'd say, like, there's nobody out there with disabilities, and she could spot it. She goes, that's not a person with disabilities, that's a model in a wheelchair. So, you know, kids, and then finally, actually a TV show came on called Switched at Birth. I don't know if anyone watches ABC Family like I do, but half the cast is deaf, everybody's signing. They had to teach the camera crew how to, like, shoot not just for faces, but for hands. And it's hugely popular. It's got it, you know, it helps it, like, they've got some real teen heartthrobs on it who also happen to be deaf actors, right? So, you know, there are places where it's changing, but it's just a drop in the bucket. But it's so exciting to see something like a project like Switched at Birth, which actually has got huge numbers and you know, great social media, and like you can take sign language lessons on their social media site. So there's clearly audience for this. You know, ReelAbilities is, I think, you know, like the Johnny Appleseed of.
Okay. Isaac, now I think we have less than 60 seconds left. Can you tell us about the next ReelAbilities event and how people can tune in?
So right now we have Summer of ReelAbilities in honor of the 25 years for the ADA, and we're screening
10
films.
seconds.
We're screening films all over Manhattan, outdoor screenings, including JCC Manhattan rooftop film screening coming up in August.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for watching. This has been an exciting episode of BK Live.
That's right.
And ReelAbilities will check you out.